Howdy there, fellow viewer, and welcome to Gourmet Killing. Today, we're prepping up a nice edible platter of fresh livestock, straight from the forest. From our freshly ground up squirrel brain cheetah tap, bear entrail sausage, to deer to rabbit meatballs. There's a lot of great food to prepare for tonight, but of course, we want to present to you a couple of safety tips before we begin cooking. This program may contain language and content that may not be suitable for younger viewers. Listener discretion's highly advised. There's also the possibility that we may spoil some of the contents for tonight's meal, so make sure that you're caught up to at least the 5th episode of Golden Kamuy before watching tonight's episode. Also, one final thing. The views and opinions expressed here tonight are that of the individual participants and don't reflect on Dub Talk as a whole. Now that everything's been laid out and we have our ingredients, it's time for the gang to go get some more, 'cause we want to serve all of you tonight. So let's grab our muskets, learn some culture, and cook us some CG bears as we cover Golden Kamuy.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the Dub Talk podcast. We talk to you in the newest and greatest and latest in anime dubs. And tonight we have a special show for you. An absolutely delightful, heartwarming show about friendship, food, and just horrifying amounts of violence. Like, Jesus Christ, Japan, what the fuck? God, you skinned a man in the first episode. What the ever-loving fuck, guys?
It's a Russo sign of war, man.
Anyways, we're talking about Golden Kamuy tonight. The new hit anime based on the hit manga about a Japanese veteran of the Russo-Japanese War and an Ainu teenager hunting for gold in the mountains of Hokkaido. And we're going to talk to you about that tonight. But before we get to that, we should introduce who's here. You, of course, have me, the leader of this particular treasure hunt. I'm Amon. Hi. And with us tonight, we have Hardy.
You gonna finish those squirrel brains?
No. Sneebs.
They taste better with a little bit of salt.
And Andrew.
A family can be a former soldier, an escaped convict, their adopted indigenous daughter, and a giant fucking wolf.
All you need is love, man. Love and Sita.
Love, a couple of skills ready to kill and maim other creatures, as well as not being afraid to get your hands dirty.
I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and he didn't know who drew this. He was absolutely convinced this is by the woman who did A Bride's Story, which I thought was very funny.
A Bride's Story.
It's like, all right, I see how you got to that, but he's usually not this violent. The actual plot of this story is we were following one Sugimoto, aka the immortal Sugimoto, a heavily scarred veteran of the Russo-Japanese War who unfortunately is now flat broke and has been trying to hunt for gold in Hokkaido. When that doesn't work, he takes up on something a guy told him, which is that long ago a bunch of Ainu, who are the indigenous people of Japan, got some gold together in order to buy weapons to go fight the Japanese. Unfortunately, some guy stole all their gold and hid it. He then got arrested, but he printed a map to the gold on the bodies of other prisoners who were in the prison he was in, with tattoos. And apparently, if you take all the tattoos and put them together, you'll figure out where the gold is. So Sugimoto, joined by Asirpa, a Ainu teenager from the area who could also use some of this money, joined up together to go find this stuff. Sadly, they're being pursued by a lot of people. Chief among them, a very, very upsetting lieutenant in the Japanese military who has a lot of problems. So many problems.
Come on, man. Veteran packages aren't what they used to be, man.
I don't know if there's any veteran package in the world that's gonna help that guy. Like,
Imagine the movie Rat Race, only with significantly much more violence.
Basically, the whole deal is that there is... Okay, I think I saw somebody describe the initial premise of this is essentially the setup of One Piece with the Rogues Gallery of Rurouni Kenshin and the violence of something like Berserk.
oh, you're not wrong.
And a nice, friendly cooking show. Who doesn't love otter brains?
Did he even include the recipes for the dishes?
It's very in depth at its cooking stuff too.
This guy did a manga. Even in the English, they have a page at the back that is a listing of all the sources he has for how Ainu culture works.
The man is a historian.
So he clearly wants. Oh, the man did a lot of work into this, and he wants to show it off. I can respect that too.
I respect that.
I mean, I don't. Where are you gonna get a squirrel?
Right outside.
I mean, look. Allow me to say that. Where would you get?
I live in Memphis. I could go right outside and get a squirrel within the hour.
Allow me to say that. Where would you get a squirrel that you would feel comfortable eating? Because I've seen squirrels around here. A lot of mange in this area. I ain't eating that.
We've got to do our part to keep the population numbers down. Do your number today, people, and set up snare traps.
I'm not sure it's relevant to the topic at hand, but I was driving home today and I saw 2 squirrels fucking as I was coming home. So, there's squirrels aplenty around here too.
All right, I think I've lost control of this episode. No, shall we?
Thank you very much, Bob.
So we're not about to devolve into eating squirrel brains? I mean, I just brought out my saltines and everything.
We're good.
Anywho.
All right, let's take off our shit-eating grins, everybody, and let's get to work.
Let us get started in earnest, shall we? And let us start off with our ADR director, our scriptwriter, and as a special bonus for this show, our narrator. Now, did anyone have predictions for any of these roles?
No.
Yeah, I would have thought this might have been a Chris Bevins production. The one reason he also did Drifters.
Yeah, I can see that logic.
I'm dry. It's historical parallels. This is a little bit more grounded than Drifters, but it does have that action piece goodness. And being able to go from info dumping a time period or a person's backstory to then cutting into the drama of a chase scene, all while learning the ins and outs of how these certain skis were made of seal fur. I figured Bevins might be able to handle those rhythms effectively.
I had a similar thought process to you there, Sneebs. Though instead of Bevins, I went for somebody who studied heavily under Bevins himself, and that was Jeremy Inman. As for a secondary safety pick, I also picked Chris George. Not sure if he's done a lot of like drama action stuff, but thinking he's done shonen and stuff, so I figured it'd be interesting to see what he would do with something like this. And Pop Team showed he's more than able to handle that level of comedy too.
This is a true fact. Let's see. I had Mike McFarlane down, and that's mostly because this seemed like it might be a reasonably show for Funimation this season, and I feel like Mike often ends up directing those ones. But in this case, most guesses are wrong. Our director for this episode is, in fact, Jeremy Inman. Our script writing, so far, it's been done by 2 people. The first episode was written by Clint Bickham, and the second episode and onward written by Jessica Kavanaugh. And our narrator was done by everyone's favorite drunk uncle, Mark Stemick.
Hey, Marcus.
It's Marcus. Hey, Marcus. Good to see you in an episode again.
I honestly wasn't sure whether or not the narrator was another character or not. That's kind of why I didn't make predictions from him. Though, now that I'm hearing it in English, it's pretty clear, yes, the narrator is just a separate entity. Ooh, theory crafting. What if the narrator's the Nopurado prisoner?
Oh. Likely. Unless, well, he could show up later. He could show up as some later down the line, but I have not read enough of this manga to tell.
All I can say is, hashtag fucking called it, if that is the case.
I mean, that would be the obvious guess, so who knows? Who knows? Maybe we can get bragging rights in a few months when we turn out to be correct. Indeed. Anyways, you may know Jeremy Inman for also directing shows such as Hakata Tonkotsu Ramens, Saga of Tanya the Evil, and apparently he directed a few episodes of Desert Punk back in the day, which I don't think I even know he was working for Funimation back then. Clint Bickham has done scripting for shows like Gantz, Tsuritama, and Welcome to the NHK. Jessica Kavanaugh has done script writing for shows like Alderman of the Sky, Ghost Sick and Recovery of an MMO Junkie, and you can hear Mark doing stuff like Ryom Terasaka and Assassination Karasum, Delicho and Gangsta, and Kinto and Garo Crimson Moon. So, gentlemen, what did we think of the direction, script writing, and Mark's narration? Hardy, if you'd like to start us off.
Yes. Why, thank you. First off, I have no real major complaints about the direction. everything is pretty solid. I don't really... As far as the writing is concerned, I want to get back on this later, because it's another situation to where it's more than one language being spoken. When we get into the Ainu language, and it's always fascinating to see how different writers and different directors take the approach when they have to go back and forth between two different languages, even when they are adapting something from a foreign language. So we saw how Caitlin adapted this in Cardcaptor Sakura. When you had the two Americans, she turned them to French people instead. So I'll get back to this later on when we get to another set of characters, but I find it always challenging. It's always an interesting challenge when you have to see the writers and directors approach their different approaches to when they have to address different languages being spoken in this sort of situation. As far as the regular writing is concerned, I really don't have any complaints. It is very interesting when you hear Asirpa explain to Sugimoto the various terms and translations when it comes to her own culture, when she has to explain to him what certain words mean. And it is rather interesting listening to how this translates over into English. So I think everyone did a fairly good job so far. There were only a few times, I think, to where translation didn't really match up, but it didn't happen too often to where I can really complain about it. And as far as Marcus's narration goes, I've been waiting for him to have a lead role for so long, and it still hasn't happened yet. But a narration is a good start, because he is, by its very nature, a very important sort of character to the show. It really couldn't happen without him. And it's good to see his take on, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is his very first narration role. I think this is the first time he's ever done anything like this. So it's a good step in the right direction. He's got a very unique voice. It's not the first one you think of when it comes to a narrator, but it's sort of interesting to hear his take on this particular sort of job. So I say kudos to him, and I'm still waiting on that lead role.
Excellent. Sneebs.
Yeah, Jeremy did a good job with direction. There are some problems that are just native to the script. While I'm enjoying this show, it still isn't quite the same adaptation I was hoping for the manga. And so there are parts where transitions between scenes don't flow the way they should. But working within this, Jeremy has done a bang-up handling of this. In moments that are meant to be punches to the guts, they come off as punches to the guts. He uses the range of his cast effectively. And as for an adaptation, Clint and Jessica have both navigated some rather tricky grounds between making this too info-dumpy, making this oscillate between its two tones, and yeah, nothing to complain about here. Good job, folks.
All right, Andrew?
I would say that, yeah, Jeremy Inman's a pretty reliable director when it comes to a number of different shows. I think this is particularly a very ambitious, that it is like violence and action intensive, while simultaneously also kind of like laid back and lighthearted all at once, which makes a tricky balance when it comes to getting the adaptation, not the adaptation, getting those particular mood changes and get your actors to react accordingly, which I think he's done a pretty stellar job of doing. I think the writing is also pretty strong. Localization, it is of course tricky ground because you have to use a lot of very meticulous words and like phrases from a language that is foreign even to a lot of native Japanese speakers even. So you have to adapt accordingly. I'm actually very curious to know whether or not they did use like Ainu language or translation for the actors playing them, which
yes,
they did.
Yeah, you can, when we get to the Ainu character actors, yeah, they have people who, in the dub, are speaking the Ainu language.
Okay, I figured. I just wasn't 100% sure, but that is very neat, going the extra mile. As for Marcus, Marcus has a very fascinating, extremely distinct tone of voice. So every time you get to hear him, it's very interesting. It feels like even though you have characters explain things as naturally as they can, sometimes you can't just have Asirpa just always saying, this is what so-and-so is, or here's how so-and-so works, because she's not always going to know everything. So sometimes when you're working outside of manga, you kind of need somebody to do that, whether it's like another main character or an omnipotent narrator, which that doesn't bother me too much because I love the shit out of the Hunter x Hunter Chimera Ant arc, and half of that is just the narrator talking to me. But all in all, yeah, director, script, and as well as our lovely Uncle Marcus being the narrator are all solid and do a good job.
Yeah, no, I'm in general agreement. I've been enjoying the direction and scripting on this a lot. Golden Kamuy feels like something that's very hard to adapt well. I was talking about friends. I was talking about how this show feels like something that should be kind of lazily described as like the Game of Thrones of anime, because it's very historical, almost fantasy setting. It's really, really violent, but it's also got lots of silly comedy and like food and culture information in it. And if nothing else, when you're directing an episode, you have the problem of like, okay, we're going to go from people pulling goofy faces, kids with rude names, at the one end, and then we're also going to have like, this big action scene and these, dramatic moments coming up here and there. And, often just, in the span of 20 minutes, you're going to have a lot of ground to cover. And I think that everyone working on this has done a very commendable job at just being able to cover that much ground and do it well. I think the direction has been wonderful. Especially, as we mentioned with the challenge of like, directing people to speak in a foreign language that, not a lot of people are even used to hearing in media, I would guess. Like, I don't know how often Ainu people show up in Japanese media, but my impression is it's not a lot.
I don't think ever, honestly.
I know of one, and it actually doesn't get aired very often because it doesn't have a super great portrayal for the Ainu people, from my understanding.
What show?
It's an old Toho monster movie called like The Abominable Snowman or something. And admittedly, like, no one's seen this movie in years, but the implication apparently is like the Abominable Snowman is some like weird half-human offshoot of the Ainu people, and understandably they find that a little upsetting.
It's a little bit racist right there.
So are we talking kind of like a red-faced interpretation as a Western parallel, so to speak?
A little bit, I honestly don't know, because I've also heard people who've seen the movie more recently saying, like, it doesn't say that at all. We don't know where that came from, so I'm not sure, frankly. Anyways, point being, like, they're not in a lot of media, even in Japan. So the fact that, like, even in this English dub, they have managed to, incorporate this native language. And admittedly, I can't judge how well they're doing it. I don't know what Ainu languages sound like. But if nothing else, I commend them for like going the extra mile in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed the script writing a lot. They could probably swear a little more, but like that's a personal preference. I'm not really going to knock them points for that.
Because didn't you say that the Viz manga translation is a lot more sweary than?
Yeah, not super, but the one that springs to mind is just seen episode 3 where Sugimoto is running from soldiers and elects to leap into a bear den in order to hide from them. In this show, he says something to the effect of, screw it, I'm immortal, when he jumps in. In the Viz manga, he says, fuck it, I'm immortal.
So I feel we should probably mention right now, what is our relation to the original material of the manga going into this episode? I feel we should clarify that to the audience.
I have read about 2 volumes and a little bit of the third one.
Same here. I first discovered this through Twitter because Minovsky article is the best, and whenever he tweets about some obscure manga you should really check out, that's usually a good sign to do so. And then what I discovered was a historical pulp to all tale that feels like something my grandpa would have read if he read Japanese.
So TLDR, yes, you've read the manga.
Yes, I have.
As for me, I own and have read some of Volume 1. And I know nothing else outside of that.
Where was I?
You were talking about comparing the screw it versus fuck it mentality.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's a personal preference. I think they've been doing a very good job. I've been enjoying the show. I think they capture the voice of the characters very well. I've been very happy. And it's always
I think they've dropped one fuck.
Well, it does bring up the question as to whether or not Funimation is sort of censoring their simuldubs or dialing it back. Because this does bring up the earlier situation where strangely, both Crunchyroll and HIDIVE were streaming Pop Team Epic. And the Crunchyroll subs tended to be a little bit more on the tame side, more like PG-13, whereas the HIDIVE subs were just F this, F that, just full-on vulgarity. And
I mean, I feel like right there you could illustrate the difference between Crunchyroll and HIDIVE as just companies and platforms. Like the fact that HIDIVE has a lot more swearing in it does not surprise me at all.
I also think the fact that more swearing does not exactly make a better translation per se, because you ever read any My Hero scanlation, Bakugo is just the world's biggest fucking potty mouth sailor man.
oh, I remember old VHS fan sub of Dragon Ball. Those were filthy. I mean, Dragon Ball's like the most child-friendly, one of the more child-friendly shows out there, and just the old VHS fan subs are F this, F that, blankety, blankety, blank.
Yeah, some kid in the middle 90s is like, in Japan they swear all the time in Naruto. Don't you know? Yes, I'm enjoying the script writing, and it's always a delight to see Marcus in stuff. I almost feel like his distinctive voice is part of the reason he doesn't get cast as often. I think he can sometimes be a little hard to fit into stuff, but I like hearing him in things, and he's doing a wonderful job. I love you, Marcus.
One of these days, we will have a Star Wars anime.
Yes.
And they're going to need someone to come up with a similar voice to Han Solo, to Harrison Ford. And it's just going to be like, here I am. I've been here since day one. Yeah. Never tell me the odds.
That just means someday he will get the perfect fit. Someday.
Yes.
Love you, Marcus. Your voice is great.
Yes. Kudos all around. Without further ado, shall we move on? Alright, so we have our first group of characters. So speaking of people who speak in a language we can't understand, we have the two most prominent characters who speak in the Ainu tribe that Asirpa comes from. We have, oh god, I didn't look at the pronunciations of these names. Crap. I mean, I think I can guess this one by myself. Let's see, Makanakura.
Yes.
Makakakakuru.
Yes. Thank you. He is Asirpa's uncle, and Huchi is Asirpa's grandmother. And did we have any predictions for these characters, gentlemen?
Huchi, I think it's Huchi and Makana. Asirpa's uncle. He is Asirpa's uncle. I do not have predictions for these characters. They were not there when I was making predictions.
I also did not have predictions for these characters. I did not meet the uncle until episode 4, and I only watched up to episode 3 in the sub, and the grandmother just seemed too sort of background character for me to even bother with.
Fair enough. Sneebs?
I kept my focus on the main characters, and sadly, these characters are supporting info dumpers. Yes. Who will provide family backstory and fun anthropology facts, but not actual characters. So they were excellent at what they did, and I'll praise both performances, but they weren't on my radar.
Fair enough. I had the same thing of the uncle just wasn't in it very enough, and I don't know how you predict who's gonna play the grandmother. So yeah,
they were good at what they did, at least.
Indeed. But on that note, let us talk about who played them. Huchi is played by Jessica Kavanaugh, who you might know for playing such roles as Moeka Kiru in Steins Gate, Aiva in Carnival, and Akiko in Barakamon. And Mananakura is played by Jin Johnson, who you know for such roles as Mina Nenki in Basilisk, Matobe in Grappler Baki Maximum Tournament. Oh boy, it's gonna be one of those days.
Just say Baki the Grappler.
I know, but I think it's a newer series, not the old one.
No, it is the old one. It is.
Oh, okay,
it's like
Baki the Grappler.
Baki the Grappler, yeah.
All right, and Ivanova and Hakata Tonkotsu Ramens. And gentlemen, what do we think of these performances? Hardy?
Well, Jim Johnson didn't really make much of an impression on me. I think he did okay, but I mean, the character is just so much of a background character that I really didn't pay him much mind. It didn't sound the most natural. Like, I think they could have probably found someone, I don't know. I was okay with it, to be perfectly honest. You know, it's 6 and 1 half a dozen of the other. I was really impressed with Jessica Kavanaugh. In fact, I didn't even know that was her until just now. Because this character, as mentioned before, only speaks in Ainu. And I wanted to go back to this. It has to be such a challenge for these actors to go in there and not only to portray a character, but to portray that character in a language that they technically don't even speak. And it really speaks to the level of skill between and the trust between the actor and the director in order to sort of work their way through this sort of ordeal where they're speaking in a language, they're saying words they honestly don't even know what they're saying, and yet they have to go back and forth between the actor and the director in order to not only pull off this challenging thing, but to make it sound sincere and make it sound natural. Which, I mean, I had no idea what she was saying. I don't know if it was a good performance or not, but I was very highly impressed with how she was able to speak in that language and convince me that it sounded natural. So kudos to Jessica Kavanaugh on that.
Indeed. Sneebs.
I found Asirpa's uncle, Jim Johnson, again, made do with this role. So far, we're not getting a huge range out of him, and I can see a little bit what Hardy said when he spoke of some of the stiffness of the delivery. I think it speaks of Jeremy Inman's relationship with Jim Johnson as an actor and director, as was mentioned by Hardy. That moment, or those moments when Asirpa's uncle speaks to Sugimoto, it's supposed to have this uncomfortableness about it. Sugimoto is outside of this Ainu world, and he is this stranger here, and getting barked at by this guy, stop what you're doing right away, is supposed to have a little bit of that tension. And Jeremy Inman really gets this out of Jim. Making the character seem terse without making the character really aggressive. That this character's tension or this character's seeming brusqueness is rooted in the brusqueness of the uncle who cares about you rather than someone who's a little hostile. And that moment was something I felt I really wanted to acknowledge. As for Asirpa's grandmother with Jessica Kavanaugh, as was said, it's a difficult task transliterating from a language that not one is really familiar with in North America, and the need to deliver that with the right sort of warmth, pathos, etc. I can't speak to the pronunciation because, as I got around to, I didn't really track down any good Ainu language samples, so I can't really compare the grammar. But given how it serves the plot that we're supposed to adopt Sugimoto's worldview a little bit, or Sugimoto's understanding of, I don't understand these people. They are wonderful human beings who I just have a thick cultural language barrier truly getting at. Any issues that may have been in Jessica's delivery sounded like something that, to an unfamiliar reader, could have just been written off as a cultural barrier or a language barrier that Sugimoto and by extension the audience wouldn't get. So all the linguists who's listening right now, feel free to dump on me for getting it wrong, but I think they both did well.
All right. Andrew.
Okay, so, this is unrelated to his performance. I love the specific Funimation listing when it comes to every time I see Jim Johnson listed as a character.
Mm-hmm.
He's in all caps compared to everybody else, and I find that particularly interesting. Like, who's playing Asirpa's uncle? Jim Johnson! Who's playing the grandmother? Jessica Kavanaugh. And Jim Johnson! Like, you have to emphasize the name Jim Johnson. I don't think it's for any specific reason, but I've noticed it right in a couple of other listings where he's in other things, and I find that amusing. That being said, I think he has a very interesting, very, like, gruff, hard voice that I think definitely worked for the character of the uncle, as well as it worked enough for telling about his relation with Asirpa, as well as her whole situation, which was pretty interesting. I'm more intrigued about Hoochie, which it is not an easy task to translate this, let alone perform this, and Jessica Kavanaugh has the role of both translating and writing this, as well as performing it herself, so she's pulling double duty on the front of a language that is not regularly spoken even among Japanese people. So that's impressive. Also, like, just the little tidbits about Ainu culture in general that are dropped by everybody. The more interesting thing to me, the fact that the bigger the tattoo that somebody has in an Ainu village, the more important they are. And I find that's a very interesting little tidbit, but it's like, she basically has, like, another mouth on her in regards to the way that tattoo works, and I find that interesting. That being said, I think Jessica does a really good job sounding like much more older, senile than I think I'm usually used to ever hearing from her, so I would not have been able to tell that was her had I not looked it up myself, so good on you.
Yeah, no, I'm largely in agreement. I thought Jim Johnson doesn't have a lot to do. So like the uncle's only really in that one scene, and I don't actually know if he ever shows up again. But like I think he does a perfectly fine job for his little bit of like, please don't die. Also, follow me to go back to the village. And, I thought he sounded perfectly good, and I like what Sneebs was talking about, where like there's a little tension initially, but he sort of warms up as far as like, oh no, you're friends with my niece. You seem nice. She backs you. You seem like a good guy. Also, I'm deeply amused by his daughter, who's got the best silly. It's not even a silly face. I just think the way she's drawn is hilarious. I know it's great. I also really
they're adorable, air quotes, shitty little kids.
But doesn't that explain like all little children, honestly?
True, but
yeah,
that is a fascinatingly strange little tidbit there. It's like, that sounds weird and stupid as hell that it has to be the truth. The fact that until you are 6 years old, your name is literally something gross and foul, so demons don't fuck with you. It's like, yeah. I wouldn't want to steal a kid that's named Grandfather's Asshole.
When that has made me decide when I get married and have kids, my first kid is going to be named Smegma.
Ooh.
Come here, Smegma.
Oh boy.
Wait, you mean your guy's parents never called you little asshole when you were 6 and under?
Son, I named you after the 2 most bravest men I've ever known. Now go grab me a beer, Smegma piss bucket.
Oh dear.
Daddy Hardy, I think I need therapy.
We all need therapy, son. We all need it.
Come here, diarrhea shit stain.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Come here, Chipotle bloodstain.
Alright, I'm putting the kibosh on this one. I had a point I was making. Jessica Kavanaugh. I really appreciate her performance in this show. Because as we were talking about, she is largely working in a language that she has had to translate. That is not widely spoken and not widely represented. You know, there's not a lot she can go to get a feeling of what, like, the flow of this language sounds like. But if nothing else, I really appreciate that I thought she was able to get the emotional content of what she was saying across, even, like, again, like, I can't judge how well she's speaking this language, but I thought she did a great job of getting the emotional content. I really like the bit where, at the end of, I think it's near the end of episode 4, where she's talking to Sugimoto about, like, you know, I want, you know, please, you know, help take care of my granddaughter. She means a lot to me. And I thought she did a wonderful job of selling, like, what she was feeling, even if, you know, you can't connect it to what she's saying directly. You're having to go off what the subtitles are telling you. And really, like, I'm just impressed by that. I feel like, as someone who's done a little acting, that seems like a difficult thing to do, and I give her, you know, high praise for being able to pull it off. I thought it was really well done.
I also know that she mentions, like, to potentially, like, marry her daughter, which here's the thing. I'm not bugged by that for two particular things. One, 1900s Japan. You kind of do whatever the fuck you gotta do to make it. Secondly, it's also the fact that, like, she is basically, like, a huge tomboy. And in already a pretty, like, cultural heavy society, people might not be down for that for somebody, and she's of course genuinely worried, like, is my girl gonna be able to take care of herself, or will somebody be able to take care of her? Like, she's strong-willed and tough, but she's also sad and lonely at times. Even if it's not a marriage thing, just stick by her and be there for her, which it's pretty clear their relationship is very much like that of a pseudo-family, not like a... It's basically just a little kid, and I that's neat.
It's more father-daughter than like romantic relationship.
Yep,
indeed. But on that note, let us move on to our next set of characters. We have two very interestingly designed guys who haven't done a lot yet, but are clearly going to be a big problem down the road. We have Hijikata Toshizu, who's basically an old-school samurai still kicking it in early 1900s Japan, where modernization is slowly seeping in, but he's clearly not down for that. And we also have Tatsuma Ushiyama, aka Ushiyama the Undefeated, a big brawny man who appears to have a giant bone protrusion in the middle of his forehead. It's very unfortunate.
He kind of looks like a Japanese Wesley Willis.
I have... When we get to casting predictions, I have casting predictions for the both of them. I did actually remember their names. I just wrote down their nicknames from their design. For Cool Swordsman, I predicted the following people. I figured Kent Williams was a strong, surefire choice, and Brian Mathis has played a lot of really standout old man characters, especially now that I'm going my way through Yamato 2199, and he is fantastic as Captain Okita, so I thought he would have been good as the swords guy. And this nickname I'm extremely proud of. For Führer King Forehead, he looks like Führer King Bradley to me with giant forehead, so for Führer King Forehead, I predicted Christopher Sabat would be a solid choice for this guy.
Understandable. Hardy, Sneebs, do you have any predictions?
I did.
Go ahead.
I only picked one prediction for each of these. For the old samurai guy, I decided I would probably go with R. Bruce Elliott, as he's done a lot of grizzled old samurai types in the past. And for Lieutenant Hammerhead, there was only one voice I had in mind after I looked at this character, and that voice would be none other than Mr. Satan himself, Chris Rager. Because he has been playing... Yeah, after Dessler, I mean, he's been playing a lot of suave playboys lately, so I'd kind of like to see him go sort of like return to form and play these big, brawny muscleheads again, because he definitely has the right voice for it, so...
I'm convinced he will be somewhere in this show.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this show is basically just... This show is nothing but all your old Funimation voice actors plus Asirpa, basically.
You're not wrong.
I had some predictions as well. For our foxy grandpa samurai, I thought Brian Mathis might fit into this one. It was a bit of an odd casting at first, but feeling around some of the previous roles that he's been cast in, I honestly was thinking back to I think he not in Drifters? Again, I keep going back to Drifters for this. He seemed to have that deeper, more rumbly voice of someone who's aged, been around the block, but still has a little puckishness in him and won't take crap. And for Toshizu's characterization here, the historical figure he's based on is someone who is uncompromisingly moralistic in spite of his penchant for violence. He will be by the book, his master right or wrong, his way of life right or wrong. And I thought Brian could bring into this some of that more hard-headed idealism that one would find in a younger character, but filtered through an older voice, through an older man's life experiences.
I find it amusing you say this character is the hard-headed one.
Anyway, that was my pick for that. As for Ushiyama the Undefeated, I really didn't have any picks for this one, though upon hearing who actually got cast for it, I now can't see anyone else in that role. I'll leave it at that till we talk about it.
Indeed. Who did I have? I had for Hijikata. I thought Charlie Campbell might be good in here. I think part of that was I was trying to think of people who can sound old but also be funny. And Lord knows I love him as Gran Torino. So, and I actually had R. Bruce Elliott for playing Ushiyama. I thought he'd have a good gravel to his voice. Also, Hardy, when you say Wesley Willis, do you mean like the weirdo singer from Chicago known for such songs as Rock and Roll McDonald's?
Yes, and the vultures ate my dead ass up.
See, I was thinking, naming your children gross things to keep demons away is a very Wesley Willis thing to do.
That is...
Great minds think alike.
That is a great song name.
Anyways,
also, before we go into that, I find it interesting you brought up Charlie Campbell because he plays the drunken guy when he's out gold panning, who basically lets loose the entire story about the gold and the tattooed prisoners, and then once he wakes up, he's like, "Oh shit, I shouldn't have told you that."
Darn booze.
Don't get drunk with strangers, kids. You might tell them about how you have a map tattooed on your body. It's bad for you.
But it could also kickstart the plot of your life.
Well, not his life. Not his life.
Not his life.
His life.
No.
Meiji Restoration was ending, man. When you gotta drink your way through that, anything will slip out.
Anyways, so onto who is actually cast in these roles. Toshiza is played by Greg Dulci, who you know for playing such roles as Ernos Corsica in Gangsta, Kuraha in Noragami, and Kurt von Rudersdorf in Saga of Tanya the Evil. And Ushiyama is played by Christopher Sabat, who you know for playing Zorro One Piece, Armstrong in FMA, Jigen in Lupin, any muscly dude in a Funimation anime, really.
Oh, and the snake guy from Fruits Basket.
Exactly. So, what did we think of this performance, gentlemen? Hardy.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest here. Greg Dulci was not the voice that I expected for this character. It wasn't particularly bad, but I do think it might have been a little bit better with a different cast. And also, I don't dislike Chris Sabat's performance as Ushiyama, but it feels a bit too smooth, if you get my drift. I think this is a character who's a big, burly musclehead who is... He's just a horrible... I mean, the first thing we see him doing is he's having sex with a woman.
Are you referring to the scene where he?
Yes!
Are you referring to the scene
He
where he
literally
hurls a
just picks her up by
prostitute at the
her
samurai?
leg and just hurls her one-armed at the samurai. And, you know, this is not a guy to be trifled with. And I feel like he needs to sound a bit more dangerous, a bit more, you know, battle-hardened. And I think Chris plays him well, but he plays the voice a bit too smoothly. Like, Ushiyama is not a smooth talker. He's a big, gravelly muscle man, and it could have used a bit more grit in the voice, if you have to say. In fact, I think that's my my complaint with Dulce as well. Both of these characters could have used a bit more earthiness, a bit more grit, a bit more, gruffness, to make them sound more battle-hardened and world-wise and just worn down, but still very, very dangerous. So, I mean, they're both good performances, but they're not what I expected. And I don't hate them, but I could see a little bit of an adjustment being made.
Fair enough. Sneebs.
I am on board with Hardy about the casting of Old Man Samurai. If I was casting from somewhere in my head, I would have thought this character would have been voiced by William Frederick Knight for sure. Aramaki from the old Ghost in the Shell franchise. I kept on thinking this is someone who's crusty and a little bit more, been around the block a few times, and I just found that we weren't getting that same crackle. Greg hasn't really had a chance to feel this character out yet and know some of the crazy hijinks that will be coming down the manga pipes. Yeah, as for Chris Sabat, it's Chris Sabat. He can't do the role bad or wrong because Chris Sabat is beyond reproach. I am contractually obligated to say that, or else Prince Vegeta will destroy my home planet.
Or if nothing else, he'll just screw up your Twitter feed.
That too. I will just leave it to say that Chris Sabat is doing Chris Sabat, and that once the character gets to do something more than just beat on a prostitute.
I mean, he's doing more than doing Chris Sabat. He's also doing that woman too.
And I'm done. I'm out.
Womp womp.
Also, I had a terrible image in my mind as soon as you mentioned him just throwing her. I was thinking in my mind like him doing the scene from Thor with
I'll have another
the mug where it's like,
no.
This is great.
Oh.
Another as he just throws it on the ground.
Oh. Andrew.
You're not getting any of my cut of the Ainu gold, man.
In my defense, that's not particularly too out of character.
I could see it happening in this particular show, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, now on to my actual thoughts. I'll give some benefit of the doubt that at the time of this recording, we have heard exactly 1 minute of both of these characters perform. It's the kind of thing where it's like, I think they have a decent enough foundation for me to go along with both of them. I just need to hear a little more of what they could do. I like Greg Dulce in a lot of the stuff I've heard him do, actually, and I think he could definitely grow a little more into the role of, like, a tired, badass former Shinsengumi. And I actually kind of see I'm just going to call him Fuhrer King Forehead. I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. I see him actually being a lot classier than he lets on, to be honestly. There's just something about the way he shows himself with the gun and the fact that he seems to be like has a much more classy fighting style, at least in the ending, his ending image. He seems like somebody who is a lot classier than his image lets on, so I could actually buy the fact of Chris Sabat playing him a lot smoother. I don't know about his actual character in the manga. I'm just basing purely off his design, and I think Greg Dulce in and of himself. It's the kind of thing that's tricky about doing impressions is like, will they get to do more or grow into it, or are we just basing off of what we've heard now? But I like what I've heard now. I'll give it a little time to grow on me before I make final thoughts, but I like what I've heard so far.
Yeah, I kind of a similar state of mind. Like, I thought these two were fairly fine, but I do think they're limited by the fact that, like, so far these characters have shown up basically not at all. And I'm also willing to chalk up that some of the roughness of the performance might just be the fact that, like, neither of these actors have had any real chance to grow into these characters or know that much about them. Like, I'm assuming they show up more again later in the season, but, like, I mean, even if I'd read all the manga that's available in English, that's not even the entirety of what's going to get adapted for this season. So, that said, like, I feel like both of these guys could I think they could wow me, and I think that's probably going to be dependent on how much more time they get to spend with these characters and developing a rapport. And as it is, I think they're doing a perfectly fine job, and I hope I get to hear more from them. So on that, let's move on to our next set of characters. Two guys who should be dead and aren't. Let's say we have two members of the Japanese army who are also involved in this little treasure hunt, trying to track down people with tattoos and so on. We have Hayakunosuke Ogata and Tanigaki Genjiro. Gentlemen, do we have any predictions for these characters?
I'm trying to remember. Is Ogata the guy who ends up in the lake?
Ogata is the guy who ends up in the lake.
Yes. Ogata's the one who falls off a cliff. And
I did not even bother making a prediction for that guy because, like I said, he falls, hits his head, lands into a lake, and pretty much he's still alive, but barely. At this point, he's waterlogged and missing an arm. So
he's looking rough, but he's doing better than his boss, who we'll get to later.
He's wrapped up like a burrito right now. Like a big frozen Japanese burrito, but let's see. As far as Genjiro, I did make a prediction for him, and I predicted Jared Green. Yeah, I think that this character could benefit from a bit of Jared's roughness in previous characters that he's played.
All right. Andrew Sneebs, do you have predictions?
I'm afraid I didn't have one for Ogata either. I keep forgetting he becomes important later on. Spoilers.
I see.
But he does.
Right,
it's amazing,
fair enough,
but
fair. Oh, let's.
Right. Yeah, spoil nothing beyond the 4 episodes we've watched, please.
I just ask we not go into further.
Look. This is a show about a dude who starts the show by getting shot in the neck. It is fine. I feel like falling off a cliff and losing your arm probably isn't going to be a big deal in the long run.
Home cooking, man. Home cooking. But I did have one for Takaki Genjiro, and I honestly thought this would be cast by David Matranga. The reason? David Matranga has had a bit of a minor undercurrent in playing shonen rivals. The one that stands out most prominently to me right now is Luke from Garo Vanishing Line. If I remember correctly, he played the cool, aloof contrast to our brawly hero Sword. And in this, too, while the character is a little bit more passionate, he has a motive involving finding the pelt of a certain white wolf. And that seemed like a thing that fit a David Matranga niche. And that's all I got.
I have 2 predictions. I don't have any for Ogata because I just figured, he just kind of gets smacked by a gun and then falls into a frozen river. He gets done bad. But I have predictions for the guy I've named Private Pelt.
Private Pelt.
And I figured especially applicable given his intrigue in hunting down Retar, especially. Is his name not Matagi, since they reference the fact that he's from the Matagi family? Or is that just like a clan or something and not necessarily...
That might be a clan thing. This is the name I found on most of the official sources, so...
Okay, that's fine. Basically, Private Pelt, I had 2 people in mind. I thought Rico Fajardo or Alejandro Saab, simply because he seems a little younger, but he seems like he's still got a bit of a gruffer furiosity to him that I felt both actors would have been able to pull off.
Alright. And what did I have? I had some predictions. I thought that Ogata might be played by Phil Parsons. I think partially just because I've been enjoying Phil Parsons in Yamato, and I'd like to hear more of him and stuff. And I thought Genjiro might be played by Robert McCallum, and I don't know why. I should really write notes for my rationale down on these things. Oh well. But enough of me not being able to remember why I made decisions. Who's actually playing these characters? Ogata is being played by Orion Pitts, who you know for such roles as Kentaro and Yamada-kun in The Seven Witches, Ranta and Grimgar, Ashes and Illusions, and Doghammer in Blood Blockade Battlefront. Oh, you gotta love those Blood Blockade Battlefront names. And Genjiro is being played by Dave Matronga, who playing such roles as Manabu Horikita in Classroom of the Elite, Hidaka in Flip Flappers, and Luke in Garo Vanishing Line. Gentlemen, what did we think of these performances? Hardy.
I honestly do not remember Orion even being Ogata because, like I said, the character doesn't really make much of an impression unless by impression you mean his face into the cliff before he falls into the lake. Yeah, so.
Also, he's got a pretty good headshot ratio.
Yeah. As far as Genjiro is concerned, I think David did fine. You could definitely tell that this is not Shoto Todoroki that he's playing. This is a character who is much more sinister, and yeah, just the determination that he goes through when he says, I'm going to get that wolf, I'm going to have its pelt. You could definitely tell that he means business and that he's going to get his fur. He might have to slit a few throats, but he's going to get that fur. So, I think he did a fine job.
Yes, go ahead, Sneebs.
No, I don't have much memory of him right now, which is a shame. I quite like for this character from what I read in the manga. He's the sort of character who you could almost make your own narrative around. You could focus a narrative around him, and he's the shonen guy who's gonna get that wolf pelt to show he's the best hunter. I think more of that as it comes out and he starts delving deeper into this, it'll be way more. We'll be getting some great performances out of him, but right now, I'm still not fully on board with him yet.
Andrew.
I like Ori. I don't remember if it's Orion Pitts or
Orion.
Right. I really like Orion Pitts every time I get to hear him, even if it was a bit part like this. I do enjoy hearing him in things. I like hearing him in things. I'd like to hear him in more things, so I'm glad I got to hear him even for a little bit. David Matrenga, I think, does a solid job as this guy. He's definitely a lot, mind the pun, colder than some previous performances.
Boo!
Heyo!
Chilling, man.
Chilling. Thank you. His whole deal is that he is a soldier pretty much in it for the money. Why else would you be following the guy coming up soon? But it's also very clear once he has his run-in with Ratar, he seems to come from a family of hunters, so you could feel like the intensity and the ferocity building up from like hard not soldier to the desire to hunt and kill and for the thrill. And it's like you can see at the very end of that episode, at the very end of his segment, like he's got that desire burning into him. He's got like a fire in his belly. And
I don't believe you. I think you're doing this on purpose.
I'm not even trying for the Shoto jokes.
I know, just busting your chest.
No, sometimes it's accidental.
You could say, Andrew, that he found his own white whale, but it's a white wolf instead.
Classical literature references.
Yeah. Split your lungs with blood and thunder.
Whaling is very metal, unfortunately.
That does sound metal as hell. Anyways,
yeah, I enjoyed these two performances, although like the previous two, I think they suffer a little bit by the fact that neither of these characters have been in the show very long. I liked Orion as Ogata, but Ogata has a really cool fight scene, and he gets hit in the back of the head with a gun, and I mean, look, I assume this character died at that point. that he shows up again at all was kind of a surprise. I was just saying, like, I like what Dave Matronga was doing with Kinjiro. He was perfectly good, but the character has not done much so far. I'm also surprised that he is alive. I also kind of assumed he was just cannon fodder. Like the other guys in his company who get eaten by bears.
Oh, he's doing so much better than.
Oh, he's doing way. Oh, you mean like his little captain whose face is just hanging off by a thread at the end.
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
you should say that, kudos to the captain. He
See,
put up quite a good face-off against that
It's terrible, but you're also right, because
That's
that bit at the end where he's just staying there, just emptying his pistol into the dead bear was pretty great. In like a really terrible way.
bear. Yeah, he had the last laugh. Yeah,
I feel the show's good at showing just enough without going too over the top graphic.
Well, I have terrible news for you. That's because it's a TV show. The manga does not let the fuck up.
You know what? That's also fair.
If you're Andrew, I'm going to tell you right now, if you are squeamish, do not read anymore. Just don't.
I will read more for my own curiosity, but ooh,
God. I'm warning you, like, this thing gets a mature rating for a reason. That's all.
I believe you.
But on that note, let us move on to Genjiro's boss. The most upsetting character in this thing.
Jesus fucking Christ, this guy.
We're talking about one Lieutenant Tsurumi.
Tsurumi.
One Lieutenant Tsurumi. He was a lieutenant in the Japanese army. He also fought in the Japanese Russo War. But unlike Sugimoto, he did not fare quite as well. A shell blew off his scalp. And don't believe him when he tells you that it caused a little bit of brain damage. It 100% caused a lot of brain damage. Oh boy, this guy, he walks around, he's got a big metal plate strapped to his forehead now, and a lot of scarring around his eyes. And he is not nice, people.
Everything about this character unnerves the shit out of me, and that's what makes him a really, really good villain.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yes.
Given that, gentlemen, did you have any predictions for this character?
I did, actually. This is one of the few I actually had a couple
Shoot.
for. And because I like seeing these two play villains so much, we needed someone who needed to sound absolutely positively terrifying and unhinged, because that is pretty much what who Tsurumi is. And so for that reason, I picked Chuck Huber, and I also picked Vic Mignogna.
Oh, that'd be fun. Oh boy.
Oh yes, because usually Vic is known for his blonde-haired heroic types, but he's also played a lot of really crazy, sick, nasty villains as well. And I would like to see him take the role as Tsurumi and just play this weird, eyebrowless, scalpless, brain-bleeding finger biter. Just make it completely hammy. And we already know what Chuck Huber is capable of. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
so that's who I picked.
Sneebs, Andrew?
I had also wondered about Vic Mignogna. Vic has been known for a while to be able to push the edge in less mentally stable characters. And there is a absolutely terrifying moment that we see at the end of the 4th episode, where our dear lieutenant sits down for dangos with our dear friend Sugimoto. And it is a cringeworthy moment that I'm sure I won't reiterate here, but after he does something incredibly, chillingly violent, he answers in the manga, and I read aloud, "But know this, even if you are indeed immortal and your candle of your life is impossible to extinguish, I'll bite and chew that candle down to a nub if I have to."
I gotta ask you, Sneebs, did you have any flashbacks to Rin, Daughters of Namasani during that scene? Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually that type of crazy that Vic can really crank up when he gets into this. That line, that type of delivery, that type of disgusting insinuation that he might literally mean biting Sugimoto to death. Yeah. Vic,
Hardy, how
this
do I
one's
keep
for
ending
you.
up on the episodes where there's like one moment that like I actually cringe extremely hard at? Like we did Kakegurui recently, and I won't go into spoilers. I'm usually pretty okay with a lot of like violent and stuff. But there's one part in Kakegurui where I'm just like, just got extremely uncomfortable about. And in this show, it's the fucking Dango skewer. It's like, I knew he was planning something. I'm like, I thought he was gonna stab him through the hand, and that would have hurt. But I figured that's the logical thing with a sharp item. You just stab him in the hand. No, he goes through the cheeks.
Well, I'll say this, he's actually doing him a favor because these days, piercings like that in a place like Los Angeles will cost you a lot of money. So.
You're a hell of a man.
I'm not even going
Didn't
to
even
acknowledge
blink.
that. I'm just going to continue on with my predictions. For the character of Face Mixplody, I predicted the following two actors. I thought Jeremy Schwartz would have been really interesting for this, kind of similar to his antagonist character in Drifters, but he's got a very deep voice that I thought would have been very menacing. And Barry Yandel has a very distinct and interesting tone. I thought would have been very, very fitting for a character as interesting as Lieutenant Tsurumi.
Actually, I also had Barry Yandel, and I also thought David Wall might be good here. I suspect because I've been swimming in the Junji Ito collection for about a month now, and all those performances are very fresh in my mind. Oh boy. But on that note, let's get to who's actually playing Lieutenant Tsuruma, which is in fact David Wald, who you know for playing such characters as Marasaki in Drifters, Bishop in Garo Vanishing Line, and he's played Gogo 13 in Gogo 13, which seems like correct casting in this instance, even though Gogo doesn't actually say anything most of the time.
He has like 13 lines, which in the entire 50 episode show. So
I don't know if you're exaggerating or not, and that bugs me.
Gogo 13 speaks so little that in the manga he'll have thought bubbles that are just in ellipses. He says that little. So I have not seen the whole series, but I believe Hardy is probably correct. Anyways, gentlemen, what did we think of David Wald's performance? Hardy, would you like to start us off?
On one hand, I do think he could have gotten a lot more hammy with it, because Tsurumi is a deranged, sick piece of work. On the other hand, I can also appreciate how reserved he keeps it, because Tsurumi at least tries to put on the appearance that he is, in fact, a respectable lieutenant. In a way, it sort of works, because Tsurumi is very polite. He's like, "Excuse me, I'm sorry. Sometimes my brain leaks a little bit, and I apologize."
Not hyperbole.
He's not... He has no problems putting up appearances, be polite and respectful, but at the same time, he's completely unhinged. And the way David plays him is a bit more on the straight-laced side and a bit less on the crazed individual side. And it works rather well because it's not as hammy as you suspect, but there's this underlying sense of dread. Like, this man is talking to you like your neighbor next door, and yet the very next thing he bites your finger off and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not quite right in the head, I apologize for that," and then spits it back at you. So yeah, it has this underlying sense of uncertainty and dread, like this man could kill you at any moment and then apologize to your face for. So I quite like. I wasn't 100% satisfied on it, but it definitely did grow on me. So it does speak well to David's performance, how he's able to balance both extremities
I now have
so
a
well.
very terrifying image that you just put in my head. I'm now imagining Tsurumi doing like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood stuff. Because you said the neighbor next door, and I just watched a Sunday morning, CBS Sunday morning segment about Mr. Rogers, and I'm just now imagining the terrifying David Wald voice of him just being, "Come now, won't you please be my neighbor?"
In your defense,
Won't you be my
In your
neighbor?
defense, Andrew, I think that is the exact level of upsetting they are going for. So good call.
Yeah, kind of. Okay, I'm done.
Alright, Sneebs.
I was on a similar wavelength as Hardy, where having read this, I was expecting they'd add more Creasey to it, but it made total sense they would go in this direction. Golden Kamuy is a story that feels like a tall tale with larger-than-life characters in a very realistic quote-unquote setting. And I would have expected them to go full-bore banana crackers with this, but to keep the polished, polite, good soldier voice going throughout adds to the disturbing nature of the character, and I have to commend Jeremy for working this with our dear friend, Mr. Wald.
So, okay. So, is it, I'll be honest. I feel this character genuinely did not... I don't think David Wald needed to be, like, over-the-top hammy with this because of the fact that this character is naturally fucking off the walls, that I feel it's actually more effective that he does seem more reserved and classy. I think there's something about the disconnect about the way this character acts and the way this character acts and the way the character sounds. Like, I feel it's scarier that way. That I actually think that is the correct decision to make him a little more reserved, crazy, scary instead of like over the top. I think that's a more effective call because it's just this dude is just naturally like, oh, I'm sorry, my brain ain't juices sometimes, so I felt the need to bite your finger off. So, oh, I'm sorry, I felt the need to stab you through the face because you're fucking with me right now. I ain't gonna let that fly. Anyways, it's rather cold out. I'm gonna go grab a coat. I have a nice coat in the back. Would you like to see? So, Jesus fucking Christ, David Wald, you're scary as shit. Holy fuck. This is not a man I ever want to cross in my entire life, and that entire interrogation scheme, everything David Wald was doing there, I was so on edge and uncomfortable, and he's so good and scary. I want this man like 50 feet away from me at all times.
Yeah, no. Like I like the way that David Wald kind of downplays it in part because I feel like I think there's potential for him to get hammier if he needs to, but I think something that works is that when you're playing Tsurumi, you don't need to be that scary. Look at how he's designed. He's already horrifying. And I feel like if you lead into the sort of the off-putting politeness, it's like if Hannibal were bad at hiding the fact that he's an evil monster. It's all this polite, he's polite and kind and respectful, but you can also tell that he's going to do very bad things to you if he decides to, and you're not gonna have much of a chance against him. I was really happy. I think he played into kind of like the politeness and determination while also giving enough of that hint of what's wrong with him that it just sold it a lot for me. I really enjoyed it. He's probably one of the highlights of the show for me, I think.
I don't even know if he's like a minor antagonist or if he's one of like the major ones. Regardless, he is effective at being an antagonist for sure, because everything about him is just like, ooh, I don't want to fuck with you.
Nope. Yeah. So let's move on to a character who's significantly less upsetting.
10 out of 10. Please never be my neighbor, ever.
Won't you eat my neighbor?
Oh boy. Another one for the sizzle reel. So moving on, we have a significantly less upsetting character. We have Shiraishi Yoshitaki, aka the Escape King. He is a thief living in Hokkaido.
He's a butt monkey.
I mean, yes, he's about as close to a straight-up comic relief character as you get in this series. He is a master escape artist. He can escape from everything except wolf jaws. He is very bad at escaping from wolf jaws, so don't let him get stuck in those.
I also like the fact that Asirpa calls him the Scat King as like It's like, I don't think she meant it, but that is a major insult.
I mean, that also sounds like I feel like she probably has a very high opinion of him anyways.
Probably not.
So, gentlemen, did we have any predictions for our Escape King?
I did, actually. And this is where I was just sort of jostling my names around. Because I hadn't nailed down any predictions, and I was just throwing things around. So I actually had two that I also used for other predictions. I gave him both Ian Sinclair and Jared Green for this role, because I'd like to see both of their takes on this particular role, this particular character.
Sneebs? You have any?
I also thought of an Ian Sinclair role. This character is goofy as hell. He is the character you could trust out of all of these fools simply because he's a bad man you want to like. You want to like him because he is so harmless and amusing, and you know, along the course of the journey, he's going to grow a little bit of courage. He's going to do the cowardly lion act, but until his courage grows 3 sizes, he's going to lie, cajole, steal, and otherwise do anything he can to save his skin. And I just saw Ian Sinclair's space dandy as the layabout card who's going to do anything to
I respect
try
the
and get
phrasing,
by.
save his skin.
Fitting.
Very fitting. As for me, I also thought Ian Sinclair would have been a very good fit for Shiraishi's goofy but intriguing character. Also, would you believe me, this was where I put David Wall down? Because this was where I put David Wall down as well. Boy, oh boy.
So shockingly, I also had Ian Sinclair, but he was actually my second choice. My first choice for this would have been Sonny Strait, because I'm a horribly predictable man. And hey, it's a funny thief character. Who plays Lupin? Who plays Lupin in Funimation? Sonny Strait. Let's put him there.
Shiraishi's not a good man, but he's a better neighbor than I think David Wald's character would be.
I mean that's the sort of thing. Shiraishi would be villainous in most other series, but by the standards of the characters here, he's a sweetheart.
Shiraishi's the kind of guy who you bring to eat some snacks at your house one day, and then you ask him, "Hey, I let you a rake like 3 months ago. Am I ever getting it back?" No. I gotta use the bathroom," and then he just runs the fuck away.
Later, you find out all your fine china is missing.
Yeah.
How?
Joke's on him.
However, all answers are wrong. Yoshitaki is in fact played by Ben Phillips. He was known for playing such roles as Fernando in Garo the Animation, Pokotaro in Recovery of an MMO Junkie, and Tsukiji Yabo in Star Blazers 2199. Gentlemen, what did we think of Ben Phillips in this role? Hardy.
This is probably, dare I say, the biggest role that Ben has been in so far.
I mean, I think the 3 I listed might be the only lead role credits he has on ANN anyways, so probably yes.
Yeah. No. He sounds funny, which is what the character is striving for. So, I really didn't have much to say. He's entertaining to listen to. That's pretty much it.
Fair enough. Sneebs.
I found he fit the role incredibly well. This character sounded a little older than I would have expected him to be. I thought this was a bit of more of the young playboy type, but this sounds still playful and not too serious, and able to do the wide ranges of going through hypothermia, bartering with the people around him to try and arrive towards some deal to save their behinds. And I was entertained and found that, yep, I was liking this character, even though I know I shouldn't trust him.
All right.
I was perfectly on board
As
with
for
Ben.
me, I've heard Ben Phillips and things, but I wasn't like. There's a couple actors where it's like I hear their voice, it's like I know exactly what I'm getting. I didn't know what I was gonna get with Ben Phillips playing Shiraishi though, but I gotta say he does a really nice job, and he goes pretty wild with making Shiraishi sound very amusing and super ridiculous. Excuse me. He's got I think it's a deeper tone of voice than I was expecting, but he's got some great chemistry with the two characters, and his screams and his reactions to a lot of things. Every time Ritar was biting him, he screamed. His screams were hilarious, and he just sounds naturally, like, amusing to me. So I actually think, while I wasn't sure what to expect with Shiraishi, he fit this role a lot better than I was expecting to, and I'm overall pretty impressed.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed him a lot. I thought the scene that I knew was going to make or break it for me was the bit where him and Sugimoto fall in the river and then try not to freeze to death. And I thought he played that very well. I enjoy him. He's the right level of serious for the show, but also kind of a little cartoony in places. And I thought it worked well for him. Yeah, like, I enjoy him a lot. I'm looking forward to him being a more regular cast. I'm really looking forward to seeing the beginning of episode 5 where he strips naked and greases himself up to slip through some bars on a window.
Oh, I'm so excited. Oh.
That'll be fun.
Let's say what now?
Things happen. Let's put it like that.
So they need to break Sugimoto out of jail. So to do this, he strips himself down to his underwear, greases himself up, and slips through the barred window.
Am I the only one thinking this sounds like the plot of an It's Always Sunny episode?
Look, I'm not gonna say that Golden Kamuy has way more in common with It's Always Sunny than you would think it does, but yes, you're correct, it does, doesn't it?
Holy fucking shit. Holy shit. Their relationship is like
Yes.
It's Always Sunny character dynamic. Jesus Christ. It works.
The gang eats squirrel brains.
Alright, how long till there's a Twitter account where people just take screen caps of Golden Kamuy and put subtitles from It's Always Sunny underneath it?
The gang adopts a baby bear.
It's Always Sunny in Hokkaido.
Let's face it, It's Always Sunny is anime.
The gang tries to eat poop.
The gang goes hunting with stingray.
There's so many
venom.
of these, but boy, now that I realize the entire relationship between our main cast of characters is kind of like It's Always Sunny dynamic, suddenly the show makes a lot more sense to me. It's pretty fucking great.
So yes, I enjoyed Ben Phillips a lot. As just a side note, I checked again, he's in fact been in a lot more than 3 major roles according to ANN, so ignore me. Also, apparently he's like the main one of the main subtitlers for Funimation, according to ANN, which, that's a fun fact. Impressed.
There's a lot of people.
I know, but I
who
wasn't
double
expecting
duty
his
or triple
extra
duty
credits
Funimation.
listing to be longer than his voice cast one. But regardless, yes, thank you for your hard work.
Good on you, Ben.
But anyways, let's get on to the first of our 2 main characters, I'd say, the leads of this show. We have the one, the only, Asirpa. Asirpa is a Ainu. Oh god, it's been a long day. An Ainu teenager who has fallen into this plot. Partially, you get a little money, but also because she wants revenge, because her dad was one of the people who was trying to get the gold together in the first place and then got murdered for it. So,
Is she a teenager?
I assume she's like a young teenager, or roughly.
I'm not sure how old she's supposed to be. Like,
She is very short because she's Ainu.
Yeah, I want to say they mention her age at some point. I just don't remember. Okay, there we go.
it's
12.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I could have also assumed she was like 9 or 10 or something, but she is also very naturally short.
yes. So, immediate preteen. Where was I? Yes. She's very proficient with a bow and arrow. She has a giant wolf for a pet, and she has the best ridiculous faces. You can make all.
And she doesn't like eating poop.
No, she does not like eating poop. No matter how many times Sugimoto insists that it's actually miso, she does not like eating poop.
The entire arc of her and the miso is like probably one of the greatest in this show. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
So, gentlemen, did we have any predictions who will be playing Asirpa?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2,
Mm-hmm.
and my reasoning for these was I kind of wanted someone to play her with an accent because she is sort of foreign in a way to the other Japanese cast. And with that in mind, I picked Afia Yu and Sarah Wiedenheft. Because they both have sort of natural accents to their voices. And I especially Sarah, she has that sort of that Danish, I believe. Is it Dutch or is it Danish? I can't remember.
I
But
think Wiedenheft is probably Dutch, so I'm going to go with that.
yeah. But she has that sort of natural accent to her voice, and also she's very tiny, so she would be appropriate to play a character as small as Asirpa. And Afia actually is Japanese by blood, so she has sort of a natural accent to her voice as well. So that's who I chose.
Sneebs, Andrew?
I was just gonna say, to make it very quick, I had 3 predictions for Asirpa, and Hardy has 2 of them already down. I also was thinking in my mind Afia Yu and Sarah Wiedenheft, but I also thought Bryn April would have been a solid, safe choice as well.
Sneebs?
My first pick was still Afia Yu. I feel she is the go-to for young girl characters who can also do maturity when the time calls. This character is supposed to be very, very competent and not just devolve into little kid stuff. And Afia can really knock
So
that
she's
out of
like
the
a
park.
little native Chihiro almost.
Yeah,
Just to add
that's
a little
good...
more justification for my choice, I think she's also really good at like young boys and some like smaller, sassier tomboy-esque characters, which like Asirpa is kind of like a very tomboy character as well, so I thought that would have worked. Her natural voice would have worked very in line with that character too.
Yeah, I also had Afia Yu. And I also thought, because I was mentioning earlier, I thought this might be a big seller for Funimation, and they might put some of their kind of big league names on it. I thought Monica Rial, if she was going to show up here, might show up here, just because, she has a good little girl voice, and she's a talented actress, yada, yada, yada. But shockingly, I was right, which never happens with this. It is, in fact, Monica Rial who plays Asirpa. I'm amazed, frankly. You would know Monica Rial from playing such roles as Michiko and Hachin, Stocky and Panting and Stocky with Garter Belt, and you can currently hear her playing Tsuya Tsui, aka Froppy, in My Hero Academia. Gentlemen, what did we think of Monica in this role? Hardy, if you want to start us off.
First off, let me preface this by saying I like the performance itself. My main complaint is that it feels a bit too safe. And we're going to get back into this when we can talk about Sugimoto as well. But it seemed that they really could have taken the advantage and gone outside of their usual casting choices and picked someone who you don't always hear from. And the fact that they sort of defaulted to Monica kind of is a disappointment to me. Because you know how I like to see adventurous casting. It's like they keep the adventurous casting to the lesser known shows, but then for the big titles, because this was a pretty big title for this season, they tend to play it very safe, and that is the one main complaint I have with it. As far as the performance itself goes, I do appreciate how Monica plays Asirpa very, I want to say, matter-of-factly, because she has this tone to her voice to where she speaks very almost phonetically. Like, you can tell that Japanese probably isn't her first language, even though she is very fluent in it, because she tends to say very, what's the word? She tends to speak very prim and proper when speaking to Sugimoto, very point A to point B, in most cases, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Because it is, she's very matter-of-fact, very down-to-earth, and because she's technically speaking to someone in her second language. And so I appreciate how Monica sort of plays her almost not, I wouldn't say robotically, but very, very I don't even know what the proper way.
It's like there's some sort of distance
Right.
between the two.
There's a
of them.
definite language barrier, even though she speaks the language, and I do appreciate how Monica plays her as that. She's not completely fluent in Japanese, so there is sort of a difference there, and I that is one thing I noted that I did really appreciate.
Sneebs.
I found that Monica's role was well cast and well acted. She does have to play the mouthpiece a lot of the time. Let have her explain Ainu history and Ainu sociology, but she does so with those little crackles of warmth when she speaks about the how the Ainu revere the bears, and when she goes into that bit about her backstory with Ratar, we get a focus of someone whose range is more than just info dumpy, but who is usually focused on the here and now notions of, let's survive this guy who's sniping at us. Let's see if we can deal with this one Kamuy bear. All in all, she does an excellent job. I think Hardy has onto something when he says these could be cast more adventurously. But again, I think Funimation is trying to play this safe because this could have been a real big hit of the season. And I think they wanted to make sure they had their most trusted folk on it who could ride it out if indeed this did become the great ball of fire that they were anticipating.
So yeah, like I said, I think Monica Rial is a very strong fit for Asirpa. Before I go into my tangent about my thoughts on the casting or whatever or not, I just in general think she has a really good, she's a really interesting character. She's a mouthpiece a lot of the time because she is literally the introduction to both Sugimoto and the audience's knowledge of this culture that a lot of people don't understand, and somebody who understands the native language has to be the one to really be the guide and explain it. Because there's a lot of things about this culture that are strange and interesting that none of us would have ever known. So it's a big job there. But she could have just been like a whole mouthpiece, but the character itself is extremely stern, but also really goofy and funny, and there's a lot of conflict between her and Sugimoto. Like, the whole thing, I like the fact that there is distance between the two of them at first, that naturally, as they start hanging out together, she grows more and more, like, comfortable with him, that she gets, like, able to yell at him, and they start joking about things and food. And I just really like the fact that they come closer to each other in that regard, and they grow more casual with each other. And I think that's a really interesting relationship. I also just love a lot of her line deliveries of things where it's like, I wanted to eat the bunny now. And then it's like, once he sees the miso, she's like, that's poop! Why are you feeding me poop? And then, like, the fact that she's screaming about her grandma eating her poop just made me laugh hysterically. I love Monica's delivery of that, as well as just the casual, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? You are, when she's petting Ratar, which is an amazing big scene, as well as just, like, the heart of, like, okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. We had Dub talk about, like, we commend, like, out of the wall picks or interesting risky picks. That being said, choices like this is not like oh, this is bad, or oh, they could have done better. It's like, no, I think it is still a really good fit for this kind of character, and I think Monica does a lot of really interesting things with this character, especially in regards to being both really serious, like info dump, as well as being very entertaining, eccentric, informative. Like, a safe casting is not a bad choice to me, and that is not something I think that bothers me as much as I think maybe you, Hardy, but that's just my 2 cents on the matter. I think Monica does a strong job as Asirpa. She does a lot of good job with the comedic timing as well as the vulnerability and the action dialogue too.
You know, I've also enjoyed Monica's performance a lot. I thought she's been very strong. I thought she's captured the voice of the character a lot, where like she is serious a lot of the time, but not like self-serious. Just like, you know, she really takes like hunting and a lot of what she does. But like kind of, you know, sort of stoic dignity about it. But you know, she also has a giant dog she likes petting, because who doesn't want to pet a giant dog? And yeah, no, I thought she, like I was saying with the show in general, it tends to cover a lot of tonal and emotional range often within the same episode, and that applies to the character as well. And I like that Monica was able to go from being like, you know, dramatic, and now she's having an action scene, and now something funny is happening, and kind of nail all that and make it feel very consistent. Yeah, no, I'm really happy with it, and I'm looking forward to hearing more, if nothing else. So on that note, let's get to our lead character. One Saichi Sugimoto, aka the Immortal Sugimoto, a veteran,
AKA kiss my ass, bitch, I'm immortal.
He's as you mentioned earlier, he's a veteran of the war. He has a lot of really, really awful scarring, and he really should be dead. It's a little mystifying. As I noted, I will note, like,
he looks like he went through a waffle iron.
I mean, you're right, he does. Like,
You're so right, he does. Damn it.
Finally found out what the awful waffle from Salute Your Shorts will do to you.
Oh boy.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, like, I think I mentioned earlier, one of the first things you see happen in the show is he's, like, charging up a hill against the Russian forces, and he gets shot in the neck, and his response to this is to just keep going and start murdering the Russians in their trench. Because that's just how hardcore Sugimoto is. And then later he got thrown out of the army for punching a superior officer, because that's also how Sugimoto do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we
the
found
that,
the
gentlemen,
protagonist.
do you have any predictions for who would play Sugimoto?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I had one extremely safe prediction based entirely off the character's appearance.
Uh-huh.
And then I had one prediction of who I would like to see play the character, being more adventurous in my casting.
Mm-hmm.
For the adventurous choice, I chose Chris Wakamp.
Mm-hmm.
And for the extremely safe choice, I pretty much defaulted to Ian Sinclair.
All right.
Yeah.
Sneebs, Andrew?
He's not doing it anymore, but I first thought this is a Liam O'Brien role for sure. You could smell central badass male lead, and if Liam O'Brien was still doing this before the video game people took him, he would totally be a great Sugimoto. Given that wasn't the case, though, I went out on a limb here and thought maybe Aaron Roberts. He's done other manly characters in our wonderful thing of 91 Days, and I figured he could probably stand to try this out a little bit. Sugimoto is a bit of a warmer character than what I remember his from that show, but I thought it would be a fun
Andrew,
thing to try.
Yes, I had two in mind for Sugimoto.
Uh-huh.
I thought Rico Fajardo would have been another interesting fit for this character, as well as another interesting choice, but he's shown time and time again he is extremely capable of pretty much anywhere you put him in. Damon Mills.
Ooh, that would have been interesting.
He is the exact opposite of a battle-hardened veteran. He is a very pretty man.
Yes, but he's also a very pretty man who apparently has 8 billion voices, so I'm sure he could probably do it if he wanted to. Let's see, for myself, I had two, one of which was, like Hardy, I also thought Ian Sinclair would be a very obvious pick, in part because he's just an actor who I think can do both the rough and tumble action stuff and also be very funny when he wants to. And I also thought David Wall might be a good pick here. I thought there's something about the quality of his voice that I think fits Sugimoto. And as it turns out, we were onto something. Sugimoto is in fact played by Ian Sinclair. You know Ian from playing such roles as Space Dandy in Space Dandy, Brooke in One Piece, and let us not forget, this is not the first time Ian Sinclair has played a man who cannot die. He had previously played Dallas Genoa in Baccano, That poor drowning bastard.
Oh,
He deserved
played
it.
Dallas?
He's Dallas.
That piece
Yeah.
of- Dallas was such a piece of
He's
shit.
a huge piece of shit.
He deserved it.
That's why you don't feel bad when he's condemned to drown forever.
Yeah, okay, let's... Alright.
Understandably, Ian's character ends up a lot better in this show for certain values of better.
He gets to eat well and has a happy family,
And horribly
including a baby
fertilized
bear.
all the time.
Can survive it. He's a
Look,
protagonist,
just because
man.
you can survive having things jammed through your cheeks doesn't mean you'll want to.
You are going to the wrong sort of bar.
I don't go to
man.
bars.
No.
Anyways, gentlemen, what did we think of Ian in this role? Hardy.
What can I say? It's Ian playing this role yet again. We've seen him play this role to a lesser extent as Zap from Blood Blockade Battlefront, but to a greater extent as Warwick from Gangsta. And this is why where my one complaint comes from is that, again, just like Monica, it's incredibly safe casting. Yes, we know that Ian plays this role very, very well. Are we going to give anyone else a shot to see if they could play it just as well? And
If I may for a second,
right.
I feel, in some regards, this cast is a little more adventurous than I think, in some regards, like, it is being given credit for. Like, Ben Phillips is not a choice I would have ever predicted for Shiraishi, for example.
And I agree with you for the most part outside of the main duo. I feel like the main duo was just very, very typecast. And they both do a stand-up job. Ian Sinclair is, of course, very funny when he needs to. He's very crazy when he needs to. His shouts of, "I am Sugimoto!" are second to none. And that's why I think he got cast as this character, because he has proven time and time again that he's good at playing this character. Like I said, it's not a complaint against the performance, to be honest, because the performance is great. My only complaint is that where is the sort of adventurous spirit in the casting in general? And for the most part, yes, the cast is very more adventurous than what we're used to, but it just seems that for the main duo, it was very, it's typecast. And I complain about this probably more often than I should, and it's something that gets to me. I've been doing this, talking about this for years and years now. It's something that gets to me, probably will always get to me, but at the end of the day, yes, Ian Sinclair is a very good fit as Sugimoto. He plays it well, and he's very enjoyable. So that's all I have to say about that.
No, that's totally fair. I just felt like it was selling it a little short to say that the show itself was playing it safe, when I felt a couple of places it was not. That's all I wanted to say. That's totally fair otherwise.
Yeah. My take for this is about the same. Ian Sinclair was not the character I thought of with Sugimoto. I thought Sugimoto was a little rougher when he had his goofy moments. I felt that came out of... That really had some of its comedy because it contrasted with his rough appearance, and I thought, for a guy who has been shot in the throat and has come through hell countless times, I would have thought casting someone with a little bit more of an edge to his voice would have been the case here, and Ian Sinclair, while full of surprises, always sounds like he's just on the edge of cracking a joke. And while that does tie into Sugimoto's laid-backness, I would have thought there was a touch of a disciplined edge of a soldier sort of circling around that doesn't quite come out in Ian. That said, when we actually hear the performances, we get to see the excellence that is Ian's acting range put on display. That line when he goes into about... there's a special place in hell for me then for killing people was chilling to hear. Yeah, it's, as you'd expect, Ian Sinclair doing a good job. It would be nice if we could get someone else to do that, try out a new role and cast someone as a leading man, but this was something they probably were banking on as the big thing of the season and put a big guy in the role.
All right.
No complaints here.
As for what I think of Ian, as far as casting choices, like, I do think it is still an extremely strong choice, because I didn't quite equate Ian to this character maybe as easily as some of you others, because I've heard him in a lot more comedic things as of lately, and I guess I saw him as a more naturally goofy voice. I forgot about the fact that he has a really gruff edge to him too, and I feel when it comes to like the violence and the action, especially the introduction scene, there's a raw visceralness to his voice that I genuinely forgot that Ian was capable of pulling off. And I hear some of these screams he's pulling off, and I genuinely think it sounds like it hurts. I forgot he could do that. And it works, just on the grounds that, like, this is an interesting character, because it really is another huge mix of, like, this is gory as shit, bloody and violent, as well as also a man who is simultaneously takes in a baby bear, and is just like, I'm gonna take care of it! I'm gonna be his new mommy! Which, I adore that line. Just the fact that he doesn't say, I'm not gonna be his dad, I'm gonna be his mommy, is just so fascinating. And just the delivery in a lot of these big screams, as well as just, I adore the frickin' when he's trying to play with the kids and he's like, trying to come up with a scream. Like the, no, you gotta be louder with this. And it's like, and they just ignore him. I thought that was perfect. And I thought
It's fun.
it was so good. And it's, I think Ian Sinclair is, like, there's a lot more going into this than I think I'll give credit for, because there's a lot to go into the same recording booth to be like, I have to scream and shout and scream bloody murder while also kind of being a goofball and having a casual forest cooking show with my adopted daughter. But also, I adore the dynamic and relationship of Sugimoto and Asirpa, because there's the contrast of the fact that, like, he kills so many, and that she is kind of grounding him in that to not needlessly kill when he doesn't need to. And I find that dynamic generally interesting, but he will do what he has to survive. Like, boy, will he do what he has to. He does the chair flip, and he's getting stabbed by the twins as he's screaming that he's immortal. It's like, he is so goddamn cool, but also somebody I want to be my dad.
He's the long-lost McElroy brother.
That's a very specific thing. I think that's ahead of my time.
Is he Dougie McElroy from the TV show? Oh boy. That would be confused with the reference only me and Sneebs and probably Roots understand.
It's a deep cut. It's a deep cut, like a bear claw across your abdomen.
Anyways, yeah, I really enjoyed this performance. Ian, like, pound for pound, is probably one of my favorite actors in the Funimation acting pool. I've enjoyed him in, I think, almost everything I've heard of him. And I don't disagree with Hardy's assertion that, like, this is the role Ian Sinclair has played before, but I also love hearing Ian Sinclair play this role. And I thought he hit all the right notes. I thought he was good at playing the, like, sort of angry mania that Sugimoto has, but also just kind of, the gentleness and the comedy and his relationship with Asirpa. And it was just a delight to hear him. I thought he took, again, another, like, character who has to cover a lot of emotional range, often, like, in a fairly short amount of time, and was able to pull that off. And I appreciate that, because I was looking forward to this show, and if the dub for this hadn't been good, I probably would have been a little heartbroken. Because this is 100% the kind of thing I want to, like, maybe not all my friends, given the level of violence, but, like, there are definitely people I know who are like, here, you should watch this. And, if you're just not in the mood for subtitles, you can turn on the English track and enjoy this a lot, too. So I was very...
Because we all know the giant CGI bear didn't do it any favors.
I like the giant... I like the giant CGI bear. It was ugly as hell, and I am here for that.
I'm so proud. I'm so proud we've gone almost 2 hours, and none of us had brought up the CGI.
I'll be honest. Until Hardy brought it up, I'd forgotten about it.
As it should be. As it should be.
I get what you're trying to go for, but boy, does it contrast with the style you're trying to go
I mean,
for.
I kind of feel like that was the point. Like a lot of the other animals are like they're like gentle prey, like the rabbits, or they're like retare.
No, the director explained it was a specific choice. I just don't think it exactly worked.
I mean, I think it did, but I also watch a lot of cheap crap where you're kind of trying to like do with what you have, so I might be a little more used to that.
Fair enough.
Anyways,
the CGI the fire looks so fucking bad though.
I kind of also like how bad the fire
See,
looks.
I don't mind the fire because it's just like a video of fire.
I think that's what
like
bugs
you know
me.
if
It looks like something you'd find in After Effects. It's like usually you try hiding the fact that it looks like After Effects.
so it kind of gives you sort of it kind of looks like the Aqua Teen fire.
And that's not what the show should be making me think of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, but it kind of.
I think I like it because it kind of like it makes it feel like a B movie. Like the thing it reminds, I don't know if this is on purpose. The thing it reminds me of is at some point Hideki Anno did a little short where he made an Ultraman cartoon, but it was animated to recreate the kind of like cheap ass special effects you got in like 70s Japanese superhero shows. And it looked really neat.
So it was like Ninja Slayer.
Yeah, basically, and it looked really neat as a consequence.
I'll say the opening is kind of going for like a B movie role, the way it's filtered. I also really like the visual transitions of like the text and the lines of the tattoos. That was something I noticed today. I'm like, that's a really cool motif.
Yeah.
Also, Man with a Mission is so fucking cool.
Where was I? All right. On that note, should we move on to final thoughts?
Yes.
All right. Hardy, would you like to start us off?
What really is there to say that hasn't already been said? It's a solid dub for what it is. While the show does have its issues primarily in the production and animation department, the dub certainly helps it out a lot. And I really have, other than a few casting choices, I really have no major complaints. I think that it's really spectacular how they are able to cover the Ainu language and incorporate it into the dialogue, which was fantastic. I don't really have an issue with dirtying up the dialogue like some others do, because I'm not even sure they used those kinds of words back then. So, yeah, I think it's a very stellar production, and I'm overall very pleased with it.
Yeah. I like what their dubcast has done. I wasn't fully in love with this adaptation when I first watched it. There are certain animation and directorial shortcuts that are made that make sense from a budget standpoint, but really take away what makes part of this series so gripping. But its core subject matter is so damn solid, and the cast lives up to exactly what this feels like to me. This is a Western. This is a story of rough and tumble people in a rough and tumble world doing what they can to try to get out ahead. And everyone who comes to their role lives up to those big, pulpy archetypes with enough humanity and nuance that our friend Jeremy Inman really pulls out of them. And I'm glad we got to get this. There are some things that could be a little bit different. I've found myself slowly being won over to the idea that this should have a little bit more profanity. This is a little bit like Deadwood, I think might be a better comparison than Game of Thrones. This is something of a rough and gritty world where a language adaptation would want to capture the idea of this is a frontier or a place of scum and villainy, and that the rough characters living here should be voicing things in turn. But from what we do have, it's perfectly fine, and I would love to hear more of it.
As for my thoughts on the dub itself, I think there's a lot of like interesting choices, some safe, some not, but I think every actor is really doing a lot with the material they are given. Some don't have as much material to work with. Some don't have as much material to work with yet, but some of the ones that have gotten to really, dare I say, chew a little into the material a little more have done a lot with it, and I'm very much enjoying a lot of these diverse and interesting performances. As for the series itself, the adaptation is not perfect. It's got some noticeable issues with like some visual animation stuff, but regardless then, the story and the characters still make this show, regardless of whether you're watching it or if you're reading the manga, and you will literally not find anything quite as unique as Golden Kamuy, I think, anywhere else. Where else are you going to find a series that takes place post-Russo-Japanese War in a Japanese society that is past, like, the samurai age and where like globalism is now an impact, where you could say 200 yen is a lot of money and not be fucking with somebody, where you explore an indigenous culture's entire thing, as well as going into the food and everything about it, and it's fascinating and interesting that you will literally not find that anywhere else, where you find a show as brutal as Berserk with a rogues gallery you'd find in any shonen anime, to being hilarious and touching and violent and cool as shit.
Have food porn.
And has so much food porn. Never in my life have I thought, man, Squirrel looks really good right now. This is a show teaching you, you know what, hunting is a thing, but boy, man, this is something.
I kind of want to see Binging with Babish cover this show.
That'd be interesting.
Nice.
I'm not gonna lie, I also kind of want to see a cooking show out of this. In a weird way. But, like I said, there's a lot of very specific itches that Golden Kamuy fills for a lot of different people, and it blends them all really naturally well. Like, the gumbo broth of this show is kind of amazing at how everything works together. And that's commendable.
Yeah. I did something else?
No, I'm done. I'm sorry.
No, I was very happy with this dub. I started picking up Golden Kamuy around the time it started coming out in English, and I was looking forward to this adaptation a lot. And I've enjoyed the show in general. I've been enjoying this dub a lot. I'm very happy with a lot of these performances. I think they're bringing what I want to the show. They're nailing the dramatic moments. They're nailing the action. They're nailing the funny, silly parts. Often many times in the same episode. I like that they're taking on the challenge of, like, we're gonna have a character speak in this not widely known, language that lives in Japan, that even in Japan is not that widely spoken, and try and deliver, meaningful dialogue in it. And am I, at least emotionally, I think, pulling that off. And, like, in a certain way, like, there's an ambition here that I just admire, and I'm happy that I think they have kind of stuck the landing, at least so far. And I'm really looking forward to watching more of this, and I'm really hoping that this season does well enough when we get more of this in the future, because I am totally up for more of that. I'm really digging this. It's really good. And without further ado, I think that's about it for us.
I'd say we can put the lid on this cheetah top and this miso and call it a night.
Indeed. So, audience, if you would like to watch Golden Kamuy, you can watch it subtitled on Crunchyroll. And if you want to watch this wonderful dub, you can watch that on Funimation. I think the first 2 episodes are free, but if you'd like to watch more than that, you'll need to sign up for a subscription, which I think is currently going for about $6 a month. You can get a 2-week free trial to start with, but do note they will ask for your credit card information and will start charging you after those 2 weeks are up if you do not cancel. But you might find you like having a Funimation subscription and think, hey, this is definitely worth $6 a month, so check that out. If you'd like to hear more from us, you're probably watching this on our YouTube page as is, so please like and subscribe if you haven't already so you can follow what we're doing. And you can also follow us at Dub Talk Podcast on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Twitch. So follow us all there. Gentlemen, where can we find all of you on the internet? Hardy.
You can find me at Spaceman Hardy on Twitter. I haven't posted many goat pictures lately. I need to get back on that. But I retweet a lot of Final Fantasy and My Hero Academia fan art. I do lots of rants about Amazon and Aniplex and how they're destroying the R1 anime industry. And you can also find me over at the Funimation forums and the Funimation Discord, where I am a moderator at both. So come on over, hang out with me. Don't act like an asshole, and I won't have to ban you. And yeah, that'll be awesome.
Excellent. Sneebs.
You may find me at Uncle Azrael on Twitter. I contribute to the Twitterverse all sorts of interesting articles and fun facts you never knew about topics as broad as weird literature, world history, and all of the fun things you can do with deliciously rendered otter fat. To find out more, follow me on Twitter at
Does it taste
Uncle
good on a
Azrael.
saltine?
It is wonderful and nice and melty, and it's so smooth. It goes fantastic in a nice little broth, and when you cut it in with wild onions, it is a delight. 10 out of 10, worth getting my face torn off with a bear for.
Add some poop in there, see how it tastes.
And squirrel
Anyways,
brains.
People shouldn't eat poop!
Anyways, speaking of poop, my name is Andrew, aka Manga Man 9000 or Classy Spartan. I go by either or both. You can find me on Twitter there. I talk a lot about the usual bullshit. Basically, I'm the one that posts the majority of the My Hero Academia fan art that Hardy finds, so you're welcome by the fucking by. As for what else I do outside of Dub Talk, and also a podcast contributor to Surreal Resolutions Podcast O&A, where I talk about anime news. And I am also a Funimation moderator over on the forums and Discord. So come by, say hi, and talk about stuff.
Excellent. You can find me at AmonDuelUS on Twitter. Duel has 2 U's in it. I retweet a lot of things, and I occasionally talk about like movies or comic books. I'm trying to start up a thing where I give brief thoughts to music I listen to while I'm at work. I hope I actually stick with that. You can find my blog at worldthat'scoming.blogspot.com, which I hope to actually update because I've made the joke about how I don't update it at all about 5 times in the last 2 months and it's starting to depress me. So let's change that. And I will leave you with a dusty old song. And I'm going to leave you with 2 because I couldn't decide on what to do. Because on the one hand, I thought I showed that nicely encapsulates the sort of old-timey grandeur of this is No Quarter by Led Zeppelin, which is great, but No Quarter is not a very funny song. It's about Vikings murdering people. So I thought, what's something really heavy that's also really funny? Anthrax! Go listen to Among the Living by Anthrax.
Yes!
They're good, and they have a sense of humor about themselves, which is why I like them. Among the Living is pretty good. I don't know as much.
What Doesn't Die is pretty good.
Go check them out. They're a good band. And
I will leave you with the dusty old song as well. I just wanted to say, go listen to Jimmy Buffett's "Let's Get Drunk and Screw."
I'm gonna be honest, all of these songs sound like they work very well for Golden Kamuy.
there's a lot to Golden Kamuy. You can fit the mood of a lot of things. So on that note, thank you so much for listening, everybody, and have a wonderful night.
Keep
All
it
right.
manly.
Otaku on, and make sure to check your miso and make sure it is not poop.